Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello. And we are going in the breach tonight with a great show for you all. You have conservative legislators like Josh Hawley proposing legislation to strengthen families and incentivize them through tax credits and the like to do so. New York Times calls it welfare. Ann Hendershot says not so. We have a great interview with Ann that we want to show you that we recorded earlier today. Also, Tucker Carlson got into a bit of he had a conversation in an interview with Ben Shapiro. They started talking about automation and capitalism, okay? And I think Tucker Carlson's been watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. That's all I'm going to say, because we've been making the same points, and we want to break that down a little bit. Now, listen, I don't know about you. My heart goes out to a lot of people, and I'm a merciful guy. But you got El Salvador saying enough is enough with all the drug dealing and the gang members and the guys who all look like MS-13, and they're rounding them all up. They're rounding up the usual suspects. We got a clip on that for you that we want to show you and we want to break down. And finally, I mean, what more could you say about Joe Biden? We're going to end this show on a high note because we're going to be laughing at Joe Biden. Stick around. You're watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe.
Mr. President,
give me a break, man. You know, our natural wonders inspired, and the reflection inspires us to take action. You know,
you should not be surprised.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping. Solid meeting with
Just because your feelings are hurt doesn't mean it takes.
You know these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by God. You know the thing.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. I just watching Joe Biden, Joe Rossinello. Come on. You know the thing. Anyway, more on him later. Ann Hendershot. Joe and I had a great conversation with her earlier today where she's talking about strengthening families and why it's important for the government to actually take action, not through welfare, but through other means. All right. The New York Times doesn't like that, to help strengthen families through the tax code and incentivization. So this is a great segment. Let's listen to Ann Hendershot, and then we'll come back in a little bit. All right, so let's jump right in with Ann Hendershot. And like I said, Ann has written an article in Crisis Magazine. Joe and I encourage you to go out and read the article. Ann Hendershot in Crisis Magazine. Are conservatives embracing a new kind of welfare? Now, the New York Times is saying yes. We say no. Ann says no. Okay. And we agree with Ann. Why? Because she's a great woman? Yes, she is. But because she's right. And that's what we're going to hash out. For those of you who don't know Ann, she is a professor of sociology and director of the Veritas Center for Ethics in Public Life at Franciscan University in Steubenville. She is the author of The Politics of Envy. You could, from Crisis Publications, came out in 2020. Ann, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be on. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your liking the article. I was kind of perturbed when the New York Times said that the Republicans are embracing a new kind of welfare. As if, it just kind of made me angry.
Well, the thing is this, it's always, remember, conservatives have been criticizing actual welfare for a long time. Because actual welfare, obviously, as we can argue and has been demonstrated, creates a cycle of dependency, creates a dependent class, okay? But it seems like anything you do to help an American citizen, if it's government action from a conservative angle, is welfare, corporate welfare. And in this case, embracing like whatever they want to call it. We'll let you talk about it. But let me hand it over to Joe and we'll hash it out.
It's funny, Ann, in your article, you mentioned the New York Times. I take the bus into New York City every day, and I get out right in front of their building. It's like the Death Star. Every time I see it, I always say it's like stairs. As soon as you come out of Port Authority, right across the street is the New York Times, the whole entire building, and it goes right up into the clouds. And every time I say, oh, my goodness, I'm waiting for Darth Vader to come out the front door.
I was going to say, when I used to come out of Port Authority, Joe, I used to see that obviously the same, but I never thought of the Death Star.
No, it's
but
the
you're
Death Star.
absolutely
I'm
right. It
telling you.
looks like the Death Star. But go ahead.
But as Joe said, what is this new form of welfare the Times is talking about?
Well, what it is nothing really new. It's people like Senator Hawley, Josh Hawley, who I'm a big fan of from Missouri, a few years ago proposed an idea to encourage marriage and to encourage families to take care of children and find ways to help families take care of their children that doesn't involve the bloated bureaucracy of childcare. In the State of the Union, Biden did the old tired argument, we got to support childcare. And I agree, we do have to support childcare. It's way too expensive. And anything they can do to help that. But to create a whole bureaucracy made me angry. And so the New York Times sort of piggybacked on that idea, saying that Republicans want to create welfare for families by giving them money to help raise their children. And that's what welfare is. But it's not what they said. Senator Hawley, 2 years ago, proposed this idea of giving additional tax breaks to families. And horror of horrors for the Democrats and the liberals and some Republicans, he wants to reward married families because they would get more money than single parent families. And that's what makes the New York Times angry and calls it welfare for married families. What he proposes, Josh Hawley, is that to give every family $12,000 tax break, married family, and every single family a $6,000 tax break to help raise children.
That's above it. And let me cut you off and ask a question. That's above and beyond the already the personal deduction of, I think it's $25,000 for a married couple. So that's above that.
Yes, it would be above that. Because what he wants to do is encourage families to get married, for one thing, and to possibly take care of their own children. I know that's a unique perspective for the New York Times, but Josh Hawley said most of us would like to take care of our own children in our own homes. And that way, it's sort of like school choice. You know, we talk about have the money follow the child wherever the school is. Well, that's what Josh Hawley is proposing. It's a choice in childcare. Parents have to work, but sometimes one parent, they'll do shift work or they'll find innovative ways to take care of children in their own home themselves. And he wants to be able to allow that to happen and not give the money to this childcare industry, give the money directly to families.
But sure, but Ann, but you're being naughty, Ann, because, and so is Josh Hawley, because what you're doing is you're putting a bureaucracy out of business. See, when I read the article and I was thinking along the line, well, that's what Joe and I talk about, as you mentioned, about education all the time. No, if the state of we always use the state of New Jersey because it's such an basket case. Okay, if you give a check, if you spend if the government takes tax money and spends $28,000 to send a child in inner city Newark to Central High School that only graduates 3 out of 10 children, that's a good and noble thing. If you take half that money and give that same parent $14,000 so that they could send their child to St. Benedict's Prep or Seton Hall Prep or any other school they want to, where they're going to get an education that's going to bring them to college or with a 100% graduation rate, that's welfare. That's not allowed. Why? Because we're putting your buddies out of business.
We are, and the child care law.
That's not welfare. We're just taking the government out of the equation in terms of sifting the money through a government bureaucracy and then trickling down to the teachers union.
Right.
And that's what cheeses off the New York Times and the rest of the left.
The New York Times is delighting in this because they're saying, okay, finally the Republicans are waking up that we need big government and Reaganomics is dead. That's what they said in their article. This shows that President Reagan was wrong when he said that government shouldn't be in your business. But it's not true. I mean, President Reagan wanted to empower parents. He wanted to empower families. And that's what Josh Hawley is doing. And J.D. Vance and Senator Romney, too. I mean, sometimes Senator Romney has a good idea. And he's on board with this idea of allowing allowing families to take care of their own children and enabling them. This has been tried in other countries and it works. Not a lot of other countries, mostly Hungary is the only one that really has tried it. But I think it's a really good model and I'm very much in favor of it. But the New York Times framed it as, now that we're forcing women to have children after the Dobbs decision, the Republicans realized they need to do something fast to help take care of those children. And that's not true at all. This was in the works way before Dobbs, because we have to find a way to enable families to survive with children and encourage them to have more children. And that's what they've done in Hungary. And that's what my article really focuses a lot on, that this can work. This really can work. Incentivizing having children and getting married. I know that's news to the New York Times.
Oh yeah, that's a naughty
getting
word.
Married is a good idea.
Ann Hendershot's joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We're discussing her article. Please go and read the entire article at Crisis Magazine. Are conservatives embracing a new kind of welfare? The New York Times seems to say so. And Ann says, absolutely not. Joe Rossinello.
And I'm going to take it even further, actually, because I think families, well, I know it's not think, that's what makes for a strong society. A man and a woman staying married, raising children. And it also drives poverty. Divorce drives poverty. I would even say, I'll reward you if you're married for a long time. If you're married 10 years, you get a break. If you're married 20 years, you get a break, because that strengthens a society. Children are healthier. It's absolutely sociologically proven. When two people, a man and a woman, let me clarify that, because people nowadays is kind of an ambiguous term, but
what is a man and what is a woman?
But I'll just
ahead,
stick
Joe.
to that. A man and a woman staying married, raising their children, produce healthy children more times than not. We'll just phrase it that way. So how about we reward families that stay married? Not just having more children, which I'm for too, and we're going to talk about that because Hungary does that. Give them tax breaks if you have 4 or more children. But if you stay married for 30 years, 20 years, I'm going to give you a break because you're helping the collective. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. As someone who's been married almost 50 years.
Love it, Ann.
I know. I'm really old. I got married as a child, as you know. But yes, I'd be rich if they did that, because my husband and I've been married 48 years.
God bless
I love
you.
Hungary's idea. And I write a lot about Hungary. I give some great statistics in that article about how incentivizing marriage makes a difference in the society. Just like you said, it makes a huge difference in creating a healthier society when people get married and have children. They don't have to necessarily have children, but if you're going to have children, it's much better to be married and have children, because your children will have very negative outcomes if you're not married. Trust me.
Talk a little bit how that in Europe, that Viktor Orban, I mean, he's countercultural in Europe.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You have you know he's embarking on these policies and has been now for quite some time, as you point out in your article. Give our audience, Ann, a couple of some concrete things President Orban has done.
Right. Well, he gives a cash bonus of $30,000 to married couples who have more than 2 children. He also gives income tax exemptions for married women who have 3 children or more, and generous home mortgage loans. And it has paid off. I mean, he sees the value of marriage. And I have to give credit to Gladden Papin, who's a professor at the University of Dallas, who is brilliant. And he's the one who's done all this data. He's lived in Hungary to study these families' outcomes. And I've talked with Gladden. He came to Franciscan University for a conference, and that's where I got really excited about this whole idea of Hungary. Well, I'll give you some of the outcomes here. The change has paid off. Since 2010, when Orban government began the family policy, the fertility rate was dismal, and now it's increased by 28%. Abortion declined by 35%, and marriage rates increased by a staggering 88%.
88%.
88%, and divorce has fallen 25%.
This is all like Joe said and you said, this is all beneficial to society. You're not spending, first of all, you're not spending money when you give somebody a tax cut. Now, I know in the case of Hungary, there is a cash incentive, $30,000.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
okay. So there is an outlay.
With that. Yeah, some people are.
But there's an actual benefit for it. And
Yes,
if you have
I
kids
know.
that don't grow up as hooligans, drug addicts, criminals, because look, I don't care what anybody says. We all know, and it's demonstrable by the statistics, and you're a professor of sociology, you know
Absolutely.
that one of the biggest causes of those kids killing each other in Chicago is because they don't have fathers, okay?
There are no fathers in those homes.
That's right. And the thing is, if you have an intact family, you know what you get? You're not going to eliminate that, but you get less criminals shooting each other. You get less drug addicts. You get less of kids who have a distorted worldview because they don't have a stable family life because they don't have fathers. Don't people get it? I argue, and I'd love your comments on this. The left absolutely gets it, but their target is the family because their target is the destruction of Western civilization.
The chaos.
Am I wrong about that?
You're absolutely right. Destroying the family is the first step to really Marxism. And that was always the way it was. Marx and Engels said that right from day one, that the goal is to destroy the family, because once you destroy the family, you have created enough chaos to make people embrace socialism and communism. What makes me laugh when they say there's too many Black children in prison and Black men in prison. Well, then the best solution to that is encourage marriage in the Black community. I mean, not letting people out for committing crimes, but preventing them from going to prison to begin with, because the strongest predictor of prison is being raised in a single parent household. The statistics are overwhelming for prison and fatherlessness. It's just,
That's right.
It's a ticket to prison. It really is. Well, poverty and fatherlessness, but the poverty results from the fire of fatherlessessness. You know,
right.
It's not.
And again, like you said, Ann,
yeah.
we're dealing with Marxists. And again, we're using naughty words because people say, "Oh, you're just like a McCarthyite." Well,
No,
maybe.
no.
Guess what? I think communism is evil. I don't ever had
is.
to have seen it tried. I could just read it on a piece of paper and go like this. Go, okay, I read about it, and no, thank you, and just throw it away. But we know. And that's why we're here at the front line with Joe and Joe. And that's why you've been in the fight for decades, okay? Joe and I are newbies to this fight because you've been doing it for a very long time. We know what the enemy is about. We know their goals. We know their tactics. We know their strategies. And we need to educate the American people and raise the consciousness of the American people. These people are not your friends. These people want nothing more than your destruction. Joe Resinello.
And Roe is now gone, but sadly abortion isn't. But I think the conversation has to change a little bit. What are we going to do to help people have kids? I think a starting conversation is chastity. You see, people are against that. The society has embraced sexual liberation. Chastity is the answer, to be honest with you, before marriage. You say that even in Catholic circles, Ann, and people laugh at you. They laugh at you. I mean, like you have conversations like people move in with each other. That's like, it's just a common thing in Catholic circles, in regular circles. People have to, that's just number one, but also then there's the financial aspect of it. I mean, unless you're a professional person in this country, two people kind of have to work to live. There's people who don't have like I take my parents. My father was a barber. My mother was a secretary. My father didn't have benefits. My mother had to work in a school system to get benefits for our family. You can't raise a family without benefits in the United States of America. You simply can't. So, I mean, it's a dilemma that, you know, unless you're professional people who can, you know, have like me and my wife, we work. My wife works at the kitchen table. She doesn't leave the house. So she's always in the house. I work only 2 days in New York City. I'm in the house. My kids see us. That's not the way it works for other families. So we have to figure things out, but our government isn't focused on that. They're focused on the abnormality as opposed to the ideal. Talk about some other things we could do, because not everyone's in that situation. And frankly, it's sad. And we shouldn't be behind the 8 ball. Because most Catholics, this is another thing. I mean, all three of us were educated. Most Catholics aren't. Like our religion
Yeah.
is a religion of the poor. Like if you really want to get down to numbers, yet they're the ones who can't go to Catholic school. They're the ones that have to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs to put food on the table. What are they going to do? And we got to help them.
Yeah. And the biggest ticket to poverty is being a single parent.
100%.
Sadly.
That's the
So
beginning.
we have to encourage marriage. We have to find a way to encourage marriage, or else all bets are off.
Oh, I agree with you 100. You know what it is? Our people have bought the lie. You see it when you talk to people. They just bought the lie that sex before marriage is the way to go. Contraception is the way to go. And the consequences of the lie, they're not connecting. They're not connecting.
Well,
like
Joe, let me ask. I want to ask Ann a question along those lines. What would you think, Ann, the USCCB, let's say, okay? Because it used to be that if you did have sex before marriage and people knew about it, there was a stigma to that. That's why.
Yeah, you would hide.
That's why girls didn't do it. Okay.
No.
But that is, I don't care what the culture says. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Okay. What Joe was talking about, what you were talking about. Can the USCCB get us back to maybe some a firmer ground on this by being more vocal? I mean, really vocal. Okay. Not just writing it in a letter, being really vocal about shifting and changing this culture to instill, particularly in Catholic girls. Hey, you got to wait till you're married. That's part of being Catholic. Talk about that a little bit, Ann, if you don't mind.
Well, I would love that, except who would hear it? Unfortunately, our church attendance is so low now, there's nobody going to church. I mean, there's not as many people going to church, and even in Catholic schools. But I'm very hopeful about Catholic schools. Places like the Boston Archdiocese, we're just at Franciscan University recruiting teachers. They want faithful Catholic teachers now who know the catechism, who know that sex before marriage is sinful, who are willing to say that. So I think more and more dioceses are hiring people for their Catholic schools. Now, not everybody goes to Catholic schools, but for a while, the Catholic schools were staffed by people who didn't even know what the church taught. I've been writing about that for years.
Oh, whenever you write that article, you come back on. That's a good one.
Yeah, but I'm excited about the Boston Archdiocese. They are recruiting at the faithful Catholic schools. They're not going to Boston College to recruit teachers. They're coming to Franciscan because they know that our students know what is sinful, knows morality, and are joyful about the faith, and will be able to convey the faith in wonderful ways to make it palatable and inviting. They were at Ave Maria University. I'm on the board there too. And I was thrilled to hear that the Boston Archdiocese is recruiting teachers there also, because they're trying to, they have a great superintendent there, Tom Carroll, who is fabulous. And he's changing those schools. Not that they were bad, they're wonderful schools. I don't want to say that they're bad, but they're going to get better. They're going to get much better. And if more and more dioceses see this, we will have a better education.
Let me ask you this about education, Ann, because we only have a couple more minutes. I forgot who it was recently. Probably not going to go anywhere, but I liked that it was proposed. The abolition of the Federal Department of Education. Okay. Now, Joe and I have been saying at the front line with Joe and Joe, and if you're just joining us, we're with Ann Hendershot, professor of sociology and director of the Veritas Center for Ethics and Public Life at Franciscan University. She wrote an article recently in Crisis Magazine, Are Conservatives Embracing a New Kind of Welfare? The New York Times says yes, Ann says no. We encourage you to go read that article. The Federal Department of Education, I think I'm being conservative here in my numbers, wastes, and it is a waste based on everything that we know, about $100 billion a year. That it was even to like talk about maybe the need, not that legislation is going to go anywhere today, but if we keep having these conversations out there in the culture, maybe that'll pick up some steam down the road. It's a useless agency. Kids are not more educated. They're just indoctrinated. They're not talking about the things that we're talking about. You're not helping. If your interest is in minorities, you're not helping minority students, not even a little bit. Okay. Talk about maybe that's a really good idea. Maybe we should abolish the Federal Department of Education because they really don't do anything.
No, they haven't done anything except create mandates and expensive mandates that take away from academic instruction. So yeah, I would love to see that happen. And there are some politicians that are talking about that. So you're right. We just have to keep talking about it because it's a useless organization. but it's a burdensome one. That's, to me, is the worst part. They're not even there to help. They're there to interfere and monitor and make sure that you do all the celebrations that they want you to do.
Right.
The transgender athletes. It should be at the state level. Every state should be able to have their own Department of Education and create their own form of education in their state.
Well, it's funny you both say that, because I think there is a use for it. It's a useful tool to basically put forth an agenda to the people. G.K. Chesterton talked about that. The state should never educate the state, our children. They have an agenda, just like the Catholic Church has an agenda. I send my kids to Catholic school. They're learning about the faith. Well, they have an ideology, and I'm not interested in it. And I pay taxes, but my ideas and my opinion doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And people aren't outraged by that. I am, Ann, to be honest with you, because I have to pay taxes and Catholic school education in the state of New Jersey. And by the way, it's a ton of money.
I know.
A ton of money. I live in a box because of it, with 5 kids in a box.
But if it's at the local level and the state level instead of the federal level, at least voters have some more control. You've seen it at these school board meetings. I've seen them on the news when parents are up in arms, and they do get things done because they're able to replace the school board members. So things happen at the local level. It's the federal level that's a problem. Local and state, you can make a difference.
What I think, and I want your final thoughts on this, Ann Hendershot. What I think is conservatives have to get it out of their head worrying about what the left is going to do.
I know.
We know what they're going to do. They're going to call you every name in the book. They're going to get their stormtroopers and Antifa and Black Lives Matter to march out into the streets and start burning things. They're going to attack Catholic churches in the wake of Roe versus Wade getting overturned. We already know what they're going to do. So stop dilly-dallying and just go ahead and do it, and we'll deal with the fallout. Roe is gone. I don't see many more riots. They had their initial reaction. Now they're home crying. Okay. All the little babies out there who can't kill their babies, or at least, well, actually they can. In reality, that's the sad part. Okay. Abortion has not been abolished in America. I'd like to break it to them. Let them cry. Let them rant. Let them cry. But go ahead and be bold. Start dismantling this stuff. And listen, let's face it. At least Donald Trump was bold enough to give us the judges that were going to overturn Roe versus Wade. Hopefully Josh Hawley and some of the other good senators and good members of the House will start dismantling some of this federal bureaucracy. And give us some final thoughts.
Well, yes, I don't think we have to be afraid of the government, especially if we are able to control the government. And that's what Reagan really wanted us to be able to do. I mean, he didn't want big government, and I'm not saying a big bloated bureaucracy. What I'm saying is I want the government to be responsive to our needs. And Josh Hawley and J.D. Vance are very much on the forefront of understanding that and making that happen.
Well, we're glad to hear it. And where can our audience members find out a little bit more about you and what you have going on?
Just go to the Franciscan University of Steubenville website and look for my name. I'm the director of the Veritas Center. It's a research center. And read the article, because Hungary is an amazing example, I think.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't want to get into it too much, because we want folks to go out and read the article, because you break it down and all the statistics. And again, they're countercultural in Europe. In Hungary, Viktor Orban, he doesn't care. No. Let's see. We're going to probably see the same thing in Italy under Giorgia Meloni.
I hope so.
At least she's showing that. And good. Yeah. Let's see some more of that. And thank you so much for coming back on the front line with Joe and Joe. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So we encourage everybody, please follow Ann, go out and read the article. And we'll have Ann back on soon. Thanks again.
Thanks.
She's an awesome lady, Joe.
Oh, I agree. That
Fantastic.
was a great conversation.
Listen, she doesn't pull any punches. Some men out there need to have some, the nerve and the courage that Ann Hendershot does. Now let's keep it moving. Okay. So it's out there in the etherverse, in the universe, in the ether. Ben Shapiro's conversation with Tucker Carlson. Okay. Joe and I are focused on a lot of things here. One of which is that we want to propose we value, because we're not morons. We value the free market, because the free market is something that we value. Okay. And we would call ourselves capitalists with boundaries. And not everything you can do, you ought to do. And we think that the ought has gotten lost in all this. So we have a clip that we want to come back because we think it's an important conversation that all you out there listening to us at the Frontline, Joe and Joe, would like to have. And obviously the chat room, the comm box is open. So let's run the clip and then we'll come back.
Why should you be surprised when half of them say they prefer socialism?
Well,
you should not be surprised.
I agree to a certain extent. I think that the question is when the pedal hits the metal. Like you talk in the book about technology and how it's shifting and taking away jobs from folks. Yes. And you make specific reference to truck driving and the fact that there are going to be these automated cars on the roads. So would you, Tucker Carlson, be in favor of restrictions on the ability of trucking companies to use this sort of technology specifically to, sort of artificially maintain the number of jobs that are available in the trucking industry?
Are you joking? In a second. In a second. In other words, if I were president, when I say to DOT, to Department of Transportation, we're not letting driverless trucks on the road, period. Why? Really simple. Driving for a living is the single most common job for high school educated men in this country, in all 50 states. By the way, that's the same group whose wages have gone down by 11% over the past 30 years. The social cost of eliminating their jobs in a 10-year span, 5-year span, 30-year span is so high that it's not sustainable. So the greater good is protecting your citizens from, look, capitalism is the best economic system I can think of, I think that anyone's ever thought of. But that doesn't mean that it's a religion and everything about it is good.
No, but
there's no Nicene Creed of capitalism that I have to buy into. What I care about is living in a country where, decent people can live happy lives, actually. And so, no, I would say immediately, no, are you joking? And I maybe would make up some pretext for public consumption, like, oh, they're dangerous. The technology is not quite finessed. No. But the truth would be, I don't want to put 10 million men out of work because you're going to have 10 million dead families, and the cascading effect from that will wreck your country.
I can't imagine that Tucker Carlson, after that, Joe Rossinello, has not been watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Because that's exactly, I was blown away by this, Joe. He, and we didn't get it from him. Because again, remember, it's all about common sense. Why is, and then I'm going to hand it right to you, Joe, because I want your opinion on this. Why is it because we can do something, let's say in terms of technological advancement, automated trucks, automated cars, just because we can do it? Why? What unwritten rule is there out there in a free market system that we have to? And I think that's where Carlson was going. Joe Rossinello, what say you?
I admire him because he crosses party lines. Tucker Carlson, if you ask me, is the best. He also connects dots like nobody's business. A lot of people wouldn't say that, particularly like a lot of conservative shows, because to be honest with you, a lot of Republicans will never do that because they are married to the economy and they have that country club mentality. And let's be honest, it saves money. Getting rid of drivers. I see it in the towns near me, Joe. The garbage trucks don't have garbage men anymore. You have a driver, they have that automatic hand. They give all these fancy garbage cans to these people in their houses. They pick up the garbage. Boom. That just killed a bunch of jobs. Right. And no one cares about it because that's people-centric thinking. And that's just not the way government works in a lot of areas. They say it's people-centric, but when push comes to shove and the lobbyists show up at your door who's funding the government, their voices are heard and the people get thrown aside. And to be honest with you, that's the Republicans' problem. They're not pro-worker.
Do you sense that that's been shifting now since, let's say, for argument's sake, 2016?
But I mean, think of some of to a degree, but I mean, how many of them are really doing something other than Trump with tariffs? And Trump did speak to the common man, still does. In the Rust Belt.
But Joe, there's an internecine battle within the Republican/conservative, the Republican Party and the conservative movement about what exactly is the role of government. Ann Hendershot, who we just had on and we just spoke to, said, no. You could use government for the good. Okay. I'm paraphrasing her, of course. So like what Tucker was saying, yeah, get the Department of Transportation to say no driverless trucks on the road. That's it. Okay. To me, that's not government overreach. That's
No,
that's not funding. That's not taking billions of dollars of our money and giving it to somebody. Okay. That's saying, no, the government has the authority to make it where it's not going to benefit you to automate your trucks. You need a driver. You need a driver driving the truck because that's a job. Okay. Conservatives is my point, and I want your opinion at the front line with Joe and Joe, is they have to get it through their head that government action is required at times. Targeted, limited, effective government action. And they have to stop being, Tucker Carlson said it well. The free market is not a religion. There is no Nicene creed to capitalism. Okay. The government can absolutely step in and ought to at times.
I would agree, but Mitch McConnell will never do that, and he has the gavel.
That's why he's got to go.
No,
That's why he's got to go.
But notice he didn't. You see, that's Joe. That's the point. Like the people who think like that they're not even just a minority. It's a significant minority. And that's the problem. Because again, Mitch McConnell understands how the system works and he plays it. He's playing it to the uniparty. He's playing it to the people who give him money. He gets it. People like, I always get his Rick Scott in Florida. You see, he's a guy that is basically, this is his attitude. You elected me. I have convictions. I'm here to serve. If you don't want me, vote me out. I'll get another job. Most of these men and women don't have that mentality.
Right.
I understand the game. I'm going to play it. This is my career. And screw you. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, Joe, listen, I agree with you on the political end, okay? And we talk about politicians, but let's talk about people like Ben Shapiro. Now, Ben Shapiro has an influential voice in the culture, okay? I certainly agree with him on a number of things. As Roman Catholics, there's overlap on transgenderism, on abortion, on numerous things, okay? But he's wrong because, now again, this is my view. I'm not casting this on him. This is the way it seems to me from having listened to him. He's a free market purist. He doesn't want any government intervention into the economy. And that is not, and Tucker's point to him was, that's not practical because all what you're proposing, again, we're talking about advancement, technological advancements. In this case, we were talking about driverless trucks, automated trucks, automating men and women, mostly men, out of work, okay? It is not serving the greater good and is not serving the common good. And any development, scientifically, technologically, okay, out there in the free market, any development has to be seen along the lines of, or we have to ask the question, does it serve the common good? And in this case, not only do these things not serve the common good, they detract from the common good. And I think that is one of the major problems with conservatives, not the politicians, Joe. Those out there in the culture, like the Ben Shapiros and others. Sean Hannity comes to mind too.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
He's a free market purist. He wants no government intervention whatsoever. That's not only not practical, all right, for what we want to achieve in this country. I think that, listen, we have to get it straight. Government has power that we give it, okay? And we have to use it. And we cannot be afraid of it. What do you think?
First, let me just say this. I agree with you 1,000% because people come first. But the common good is an ambiguous term, and there are many people that don't view it in that way. You see, you're viewing it as well as I'm viewing it, and I even will say Tucker Carlson, he's not Catholic, but it's a Christian idea. I have to care for my fellow man. One of the many reasons why I like Tucker Carlson, he is a blue blood. He is part of the establishment, and he turned his back on them. That's why they hate him. He is a danger to them. A danger to them. He has the keys. He's fifth generation, like boarding school. Like this is a wealthy family. Right. And he basically doesn't act or think like that. You see, the common good to a lot of people is not what Tucker Carlson, because they don't care about those 11%, the 11% of the people in the country that use the driving as their, means of making money, putting bread on the table. They don't care. The common good to them is, well, we're going to generate other jobs. Well, basically what that means is I'm just going to get rich.
Right.
They're not going to say that,
Right.
but I'm just going to get rich. And why don't they see? To be honest with you, dude, because God isn't the priority. And that's capitalism. The only way capitalism works, one way, there has to be moral boundaries. Capitalism without moral boundaries, without a populace that is not grounded in something substantive like God, even a basic golden rule, do unto others as I want them. We'll just call it that.
Right.
Is savage.
Let's keep it moving. I do want to leave the audience with this. You could go out and Google it. I don't have the link. If you want to see the difference between a Tucker Carlson and a Sean Hannity, go watch. If you put in a few keywords, Tucker ends his show one night. This is within the last couple of years. Ends his show one night, calling it obscene that based on the price increase in Amazon after their earnings came out, Jeff Bezos' net worth went up $13 billion. That's just what it went up in one day. Tucker Carlson called it obscene. This was at the end of his show. Hannity comes after Carlson. Tucker was handing it over to Hannity, and Hannity goes, but remember, we live in a capital society, and you take risks, and you really should be able to, get the reward. Again, I'm paraphrasing. And Tucker's looking like this. Like, what did he just do? He just stepped on my show. No, he just stepped on my idea. I called Jeff Bezos obscene, okay, for making $13 billion in a day. And Sean Hannity was defending it. That is what we have to go through in our conservative movement. Let's move on, because there's another thing.
It looks like a sea of skin and tattoos. These images, released by El Salvador's government, shows the transfer of about 2,000 inmates, stripped to their shorts and with their heads shaved, to what's been dubbed the country's new mega prison. It just opened. It's believed to be the largest prison in the Americas, with a capacity for 40,000 people, and it's the latest step in a controversial crackdown on crime that's caused the country's prison population to soar. Human rights organizations have reported that innocent people have been caught up in the law enforcement campaign. That includes dozens, they say, who have died in police custody.
Now, there's a couple things, Joe, to talk about there, to unpack. Let's start with the most obvious thing. Is El Salvador acting humanely? I think that's a question that let's keep it with Americans, okay? And yes, Christian Americans, or let's say those who, let's say, have a moral grounding. People of goodwill, Christians, Orthodox Jews, people like that. Okay. Is it right what El Salvador is doing? That clip, 2,000, that they rounded up, that mega prison can handle 40,000 inmates. You see what these guys look like. They look like, MS-13 and whatever gang they belong to, with all the tats and everything else. I guarantee you the government didn't just round these guys up arbitrarily. I'm sure they knew who they were rounding up. And they're basically just sticking them in a hole. Why? Because they have control of the country. They want to get rid of the murders, the drug dealing, the gang-related murders, violence, all of it. And in my heart, Joe, I'm sympathetic towards the El Salvadorian government. I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't think what they're doing is inhumane. These men are criminals and murderers, and you have to go to jail to protect society. You have to. That's just the way it is. I mean, you don't put it's not that they even look like MS-13. They are.
They are. Well, I was thinking that maybe they have a different name, but yes, it's all come from the same
these are
law.
Criminals. I mean,
Right.
This is not, the Boy Scouts.
Right.
So, I mean, and they have to be in jail to protect society. I mean, at the end of the day, I have no problem with that. And I don't know why anyone would, for that matter.
I think what people are looking at there, Joe Arsenault. Now, again, you got the comments. You got the comments there from the narrator about questions about due process and all of that. Joe, there's countries out there in the world that don't have due process. Now, I'm not familiar with the the process by which people get, convicted of crimes in El Salvador, rules of evidence and things that we take for granted. I just quite frankly don't know. I'm ignorant on that. But I have to imagine that if they're taking this step, that means they're fed up. They're fed up. I mean, at some point you would think that Mexico would do the same thing, but obviously they've shown themselves to be very ineffective. El Salvador, on the other hand, is saying, no, no, we're going to protect ourselves. The problem is you have the narrator and then you have the optics. And the optics is you got these guys in underwear, you're humiliating them, you're rounding them up, you're lining them up like savages. That's what your Human Rights Watch is going to say. That's what your Southern Poverty Law Center, if they chime in, is going to say, and other ACLU. That's what they're going to say. They're all going to say that. They're going to trumpet that line. And in the meantime, these guys, many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, okay, but my assumption is many of them are stone cold killers. That's what they are. And El Salvador is saying, no way, we're not doing this anymore.
A lot of those governments are corrupt. I mean, Mexico doesn't have control of its government. There's lawlessness. I mean, that's a big problem with a lot of countries in Central America. There's just lawlessness, bribery, mass corruption. I mean, listen, that's just a shame. And ultimately, they're in their underwear because they're trying to make sure they don't have weapons. I mean, that's not, that's on purpose.
Right.
Listen, you commit crimes, you hurt people, you have to go to jail. It comes right down to that. There's a reason why there are police. There's a reason why there are jails. Period. End of story. That doesn't mean you starve people. That doesn't mean you put them in a dog cage. But it does mean you did something wrong and you're a threat to other people. Listen, we've grown up. I grew up with people that belonged in jail. To be honest with you, there's a couple of them that come to mind, one of which is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that I knew very well. They found him dead in Patterson at 38 in his truck. So, I mean, like, people, there's a reason why there are jails. And listen, that's just the way it goes. Hopefully they repent. I mean, that's why it's called a penitentiary. I mean, that's
right.
At the end of the day, I have listen, you got to go to jail.
Well, and like I said, I mean, I know in my heart of hearts that what they're trying to do with that clip is they're trying to tug at people's heartstrings and say, oh, look, some of them have died in custody and blah, 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 which I'm sure is the case. But I have a hard time having any sympathy for any one of those guys. All right. Because we've seen it here. We've seen with some of the MS-13 gang members that have come across the border. These guys are vicious, Joe. They have no sense of right and wrong. Like you could say what you want, and we don't defend them here. Italian gangsters, all right, of the 20th century, okay, you couldn't even compare those guys to these guys. These guys have zero sense of right and wrong, none whatsoever. They'll kill whole families. They don't care. They'll rape women. They'll get involved in human trafficking, drug smuggling. They'll put a bullet in your head at the drop of a dime. And I think El Salvador is saying, well, we know this about them, and we're going to make sure that we let them know who the boss is. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting because that the left is going to try to make political hay out of that by saying that the El Salvadorian government is treating those people unfairly. So anyway, any final thoughts, Joe?
I think the left is treating us unfairly.
Well, no, that's true. Let's, Joe, we have a little bit of extra time tonight. Go to the clip. This is an Anglo-Catholic priest talking about drag queens. I think you're going to love it.
Yesterday, I attended an event in South London protesting against drag queen storytime. I find it shocking how commonplace a drag queen storytime is becoming. In my opinion, for children to be exposed to such behaviour is surely not age appropriate. As a former safeguarding officer, I can tell you until recently, it would most certainly have been considered a safeguarding concern. So what has changed?
What has changed is that the left has gotten control. God bless this priest, by the way. My understanding he's an Anglo-Catholic. I think that is actually a category of priest. Might as well be Catholic. Anyway, but yeah, he goes on to say that, in there, that, why is it that's so necessary? Is it that you want to expose children to the drag queen? Or is that you want the drag queen to get close to little kids? I think that's a legitimate question. And by the way, that was in England. And did you see the sign said Turning Point UK? So evidently Turning Point is trying to do and stage these protests there also. But Father asked a legitimate question, Joe. You know, like up till 5 minutes ago, this wasn't allowed. Why are we allowing it now?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how any parent would take their kid to such a thing. All that is, I mean, like they're just trying to basically make it normal. It's like as if that behavior is normal, and it's not. And ultimately, listen, I can't control the craziness in the society. I can't. I mean, I look at things as a father. I just say to myself, "Good Lord!" And too many people, frankly, have drank the Kool-Aid. They have no problem with these things. Well, I'll be truthful with you. I do, and I'm not exposing my kids to that. Call me whatever you want. Listen, we all have free will. We all make choices. Well, I'm making mine, and I live with it. And I sleep very well with that decision.
Of course.
And I'll be truthful with you. I think it's a big mistake. It's a big, big, big mistake. And I say this constantly, Joe, but the proof is in the pudding. All these great ideas that everyone has, all these great ideas, and everybody's a mess.
Right.
Everybody is a mess.
But then they want to deny it because good people out there want to study these things. Just like Matt Walsh did the commentary, the documentary, What is a Woman, right? Where he's not just throwing just his own opinion out there. He's presenting facts to this professor and this sociologist. They don't have an answer for it. One thing I will say that I think you said it wrong, not to disagree with you, Joe Ressinello at the front line with Joe and Joe. It's a mistake on the part of society, on the part of the Marxists that are perpetrating this, okay? It is deliberate because as we mentioned with Ann Hendershot early on, okay? The Marxist knows what he's doing. The Marxist knows they want this destruction of the family. What better way to do that than to get to these little kids, confuse them sexually? For them, hopefully they'll go to a so-called doctor and get mutilated and never be able to have kids. That would lead to the destruction that the left is looking for. I don't know why everybody's got to coddle the left and worry about being offensive. They're the most offensive people there are. That fat chick or that fat guy who's dressed up as a chick in that video that we just showed has no business around kids. None.
10 years
whatsoever.
ago that he'd get arrested. And all of a sudden, somehow that was some type of prehistoric idea. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that never would have happened. Would never, ever, ever, even if you suggested it.
Right.
But again, Joe, facts don't matter like anymore. Joe,
Right.
they don't. You could say them to people. It's like talking to the wall. And all I could say is the proof is in the pudding. Dude, I'll say it again. Look out your window, see what's going on. The problem, and this is what I said with Ann, people aren't connecting the dots to their choices. It's like a woman that likes to date bad men. It's like rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. But she doesn't connect the dot that you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you think you're going to get a different outcome, but you're not.
Right.
And that's what society hasn't been able to grapple with, because ultimately to change means you have to look at yourself in the mirror, and they're not willing to do it. And ultimately, the consequences are going to be the same.
Well, Joe,
Bad.
if the complacent out there, if the fence sitters out there, if they want a wake up call, wait till little 7-year-old Johnny comes home and says, "I want to be a girl," or "I think I'm a girl." Maybe that'll wake him up. Just your average father out there, guy like us, okay? But indifferent, just worries about going to work. He sends a kid to public school. I don't want to worry about that. My kid's fine. I'll play baseball. I'll play football with him, blah, blah, blah. We'll watch the New York Jets on the weekend. And Johnny comes home and says, "I think I'm a girl." I think that's going to wake him up, Joe. I think that's going to wake him up.
But
because it hits home.
The dots? Do they connect the dots that he wasn't going to church? Do they connect the dots that the father was watching porn? Does he connect the dots that the father doesn't pay it? You see, that's what I'm talking about. That's the lack of connecting of the dots. Like, they're not looking Our choices are doing this. That guy probably still doesn't connect that dot.
Well, listen, Joe, when that happens, my heart goes out to them. But at the end of the day, I say the same thing all the time in the show. If that happens to you out there, any of the complacent people, go on and cry in your coffee, but don't come bitching to me. Joe, we got to end on a positive note, Joe.
It's just sad. Joe, I'll be truthful with you. People are blind. They're blind, and it's sad. I look at it, I'll be truthful with you. I look on, I don't see everything, and I'm not perfect. But I'll tell you what, I don't have these issues. And I'm not a genius.
Right.
And I'm just saying, and I prescribe to first principles. I don't have these problems, nor does anyone in my house.
Right.
And so ultimately, we're not perfect, but what I am seeing is the world is a friggin' mess.
Yep.
It's not working, and this is a symptom of bad choices.
No, it's
I don't know
Joe.
what else to say.
Joe, you're exactly right, but we have a couple minutes left. Joe, let's end on a happy note. And I get happy when we can laugh at Joe Biden. Play it, John.
Oh my.
Over the Holly River. Look, in Warsaw, or excuse me, Washoe County in Nevada, we're spending $89 billion to add several lanes.
There's been criticism that this bill is trying to compromise by your family's business relationships. Sir, Mr. President, there is
Give me a break, man.
Did you overreact?
Give me a break, man.
You know, our natural wonders inspire, and the reflection inspires our to take action. You know, America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping, traveling with him. I actually traveled 17,000 miles when I was vice president. I don't know that for a fact. A solid meeting with they make a very good point. Here's the deal. Here's what drives the driver in the states that are affected. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
You know the thing. You know the thing, Joe. Joe, my favorite one. Those here's the one that cracks me up no more than anything. America can be summed up in one word, and it's somewhere in the foothills of the Himalayas. Like what the?
They will try to convince you. Watch the people behind him. Like that's my favorite thing. Did you watch what's her face? The Supreme Court Justice. Her face, she just looks down. And Kamala Harris also has she's holding back laughter.
Right.
That's what I always get a kick out of.
And she's nobody to hold back laughter because when she gets going on word salad, that woman is incomprehensible.
Oh,
you can't understand what's coming out of her mouth. And then when she gets busted, she cackles.
Dude.
Listen.
That's on Australian TV. They're just mocking him.
And good.
The leader of the free world.
I'm at the point now. Let him mock. Let him mock. America deserves to be mocked. You know what I mean? They installed this guy who never campaigned, never came out of his basement. Okay, never did anything and got 80 million votes. They, I guess, installed this guy, and he can't even string a sentence together. And they have the nerve, Joe, to suggest that the Democrats, he's got support rising amongst the Democrats to run in 2024. No, he doesn't. Joe, I'm going to hand you the last word.
Well, Joe Biden, we've talked about it ad infinitum. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It is what it is. And as my mother always says, you get what you deserve. And frankly, this is what you want. Well, this is what you're going to get.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I don't know what else to say.
And I'll say what my 83-year-old Italian mother always said. Hey, that's the world that we live in. Anyway, thank you for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, having fun going way in the breach. Remember, if wherever you're watching this video, we never ask you for money, guys, ever. Okay. Please help us out for 30 seconds. Share a video, click a like, do something that's going to help us with the algorithm. The Frontline TV or the Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube, either one, and at with Joe and Joe on Twitter, at with Joe and Joe on Twitter. We're really trying to build up there. And as always, thank you for coming by. We really appreciate your support. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll see you soon.